Hi Year 4 and welcome to your Monday afternoon history lesson. I'm just going to share my screen with you so that we can all look at things together. So in today's lesson we're going to be learning what are the key features of a Greek myth. Last week in the afternoon lessons with me and with Miss Whitehouse, we learned some of the stories from the Greek myths. Perhaps you'd like to pause the video now and just have a look at some of these pictures and see if you can recognise some of the myths that we looked at last week. And think about which is your favourite one. Maybe your favourite was the one about Pandora and the box that she just couldn't stop herself from opening. She was so nosy. Maybe you liked the story of Perseus and the horrible monster, the Medusa with the snake hair. Maybe you preferred the story about Theseus going into the labyrinth, into the maze on the island of Crete and fighting with this hideous monster that was half bull and half man. So the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. Or maybe you like the story of clever Odysseus and the giant Cyclops with just one eye in the middle of his forehead. Today we're going to think about some of the things that are kind of in common, or the kind of ingredients or features of Greek myths. So I've just got a picture of a cake here, because sometimes when we make a cake we think about the different ingredients we put in to make a cake. So if we were making a cake, we might use eggs, we would probably use some flour, probably use some sugar, and we might, if we're making a chocolate cake, use chocolate. So those are the ingredients that go into making our cake. And it's a bit like that with Greek myths as well. So a traditional Greek myth has its own kind of ingredients or features. It doesn't mean that every Greek myth would have all of these ingredients in them, but there were quite common things that you would find in them if you looked. So the first thing was quite often the gods and goddesses of the ancient Greek civilization made an appearance in these stories. So quite often they played a key role as characters in the story. And we also often have these kind of mythological creatures, so creatures that are a bit made up, maybe a bit magical, that play a key part in the stories as well. Then we've got our heroes or our heroines. So hero is a sort of main character that's a man, and a heroine is the female version of that. And the final thing, which isn't in all of the stories, but is in some of them, is a lesson. So from reading the story, from listening to the story, from hearing the story, you would learn something about maybe how it's a good way to live your life, or about some of the mistakes that other people have made, so you don't make those mistakes too. So let's look at all of these ingredients. We'll look at them each one in turn and try and think about how they relate to Greek myths. So gods and goddesses, first of all. We've got some little pictures up here to help you sort of think about what those are. But when we think about a god or a goddess, we usually think of somebody who's like superhuman, who's got power over nature, or power over the things on the planet, or power over the lives of people. And in our modern religions, in Christianity and in Islam, the God in those religions often is setting a really good example of how to live your life in a really good way. So that's something that people can follow and try and be more like that. But the ancient Greek gods weren't really like that. They often didn't behave very well at all. Often they were jealous or angry, or they wanted to take revenge on people. Or they wanted to fight where they had wars with other gods or competitions with other gods. They weren't exactly kind of exemplary people to follow. But there were a lot of them, and they had powers over different things. So for example, Poseidon, who we've got a picture of here, he was the god of the sea. And you can see he's just, with his hand, he's just bringing the waves, whipping up the waves to make a storm. So in the Greek myths, we often hear about the gods and how they interfere in people's lives, either to help them because they were on that person's side, or to stop them from doing things. So the gods and goddesses played a key part in the stories that the Greeks told. The next ingredient in our Greek myth kind of cake mixture is heroes and heroines. So they're the same thing, but just one's a boy and one's a girl. A hero is someone who people admire, and they're admired because they're either really brave, or because they come and save the day, or because they've achieved some really, really amazing things. So I thought we could have a think about who are our heroes. And I was sort of thinking about who could be heroes today. And some people, when you say who are your heroes, they think of superheroes. So I've got a picture of Superman here. And Superman, when somebody's in trouble, he kind of dons his uniform, his superhero outfit, and he zooms off with his cape flying out behind him, and he goes and holds up bridges, or he rescues people from falling down buildings, or from car accidents that haven't yet happened. So he's kind of a real hero who comes and saves the day. And then I was thinking about someone else who I think is a bit of a hero. There's two reasons why this man, who's Marcus Rashford, could be a bit of a hero. If you're a football fan, he could be a bit of a sporting hero for you. You might think he's just an amazing footballer, and that he always scores loads of amazing goals. But he's also a bit of a hero because he has really stood up to the government during this pandemic crisis, and he has made sure that the government had to carry on providing school dinners for people who wouldn't otherwise have a school dinner. And he's made sure that the government did that all through the summer holidays and all through the holidays. So he's a bit of a hero in that sense as well. He's achieved some amazing things, and he's kind of saved the day for some people, I think. And then I was also thinking, I carried on thinking about coronavirus in terms of heroes. And I also thought about some of these people. So you may remember in the summer, and when we had our first lockdown, which seems a long time ago now, we did some clapping on Thursday evenings, and every Thursday evening everyone would go outside and they'd bang on their saucepans, and some people had little concerts and everybody clapped. And we clapped for these people who are the heroes who are working in the NHS, the doctors and the nurses and the carers, and all of those people who are looking after all those really sick people who are really sick with coronavirus. And so some people would say they're heroes, really, because they're quite brave, putting their own lives at risk and really saving the lives of some of those people who are very sick. So they could be another kind of hero. So perhaps if you get a chance to, or you want to pause the video, you could think about who your heroes are. In the Greek myths, a hero or heroine often has a problem or a quest to solve. So the main character in the story is often given a quest or a mission to accomplish as part of the story. So you might have a think about any of the characters we read about last week together, and think about if any of those we would count as a hero. Okay. So moving on to the next ingredient in our Greek myth, and that's mythological creatures. You might want to practice saying that if you're on your own. Mythological creatures. And a mythological creature is a kind of imaginary, made-up creature, sometimes a bit magical, which appears in the myths. For example, we often hear about dragons in fairy tales, don't we? We know they're not really real, but they are a sort of an animal that often appears in it. And this one's a Hungarian horntail from the Harry Potter film. In the Greek myths, a mythological creature is often a mixture of real animals. So, for example, I don't know if you remember us talking about the Pegasus, and the Pegasus was a horse with wings. So it's got some features which is a real animal, a horse, and obviously birds, real birds have wings, and they're kind of stuck together in this imaginary animal. But as well as kind of being sort of different bits of different animals, Greek mythological creatures were often monsters as well. So often quite not very nice creatures, a bit evil. So think back to those stories we read last week, and can you have a think about any mythological creatures that we met in our stories last week in our myths? And then the final ingredient of our Greek myths is a lesson. So a lesson is something in the story that teaches you how to be a better person, or it kind of explains something that happens in the world a little bit more detail. So I don't know if you can recognise the story in the picture. Maybe just have a minute, pause the video, and if you want to make the picture a bit bigger so you can see. See if you can recognise the story and see if you can think about what you think the lesson in that story might be. Okay, so hopefully you recognise that this is the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears as she is eating the porridge in the house, and there they are through the window coming back. And I think the lesson to this story is that you shouldn't really steal from people, because if you do, bad things might happen. And in the story, Goldilocks steals things that aren't hers, and she also breaks things that aren't hers. And bad things happen because at the end of the story, the bears chase her out through the woods, don't they? And she's really frightened. So I think the moral of that story is that you shouldn't do that. You should leave people to have their own things and respect the fact that they are theirs. So not all Greek myths had a lesson, but often there was a bit of a message or an underlying story that helped people stop them from making the same mistakes that some of the heroes made in the myths, or help them to realise what was important and what things they should be doing. Right, so what we're going to do now is we are going to watch a little bit of the story of Perseus and Medusa again and see if we can spot any of the features of the Greek myths from that story. So we've got the gods and goddesses, we've got the hero or heroine of the story. We're going to be looking out for a mythological creature or a monster, and we're also going to be thinking about what the lesson of that story might be. So I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully this will come up and play.
Perseus grew up to become a strong and wise man, and he loved his mother very much. One day, the king of the island, Polydectes, saw Danae and wanted to marry her, but Danae rejected his offer. This made the king very angry, so he ordered his soldiers to arrest her and then made Danae his slave. The next day, Perseus arrived at the palace looking for his mother. To get rid of him, the king told Perseus to bring him the head of Medusa, the Gorgon, if he wanted his mother back. Little did Perseus know that the king was sending him to his doom. For whoever laid eyes on Medusa turns into stone. Her body was covered in scales and had masses of hissing snakes for hair. Perseus left the island searching for Medusa. Along the way, he met Athena and Hermes, who gave him a sickle, a reflective shield, and a pair of flying sandals. Do not look at Medusa's face. Use this shield instead, warned Athena. They told him to meet the water nymphs for more help. Perseus searched for many days and finally met the water nymphs sitting by a river. When they heard the plight of Perseus, they took pity and gave him the magical helmet of invisibility. And so, with the help of gods and nymphs, Perseus was ready to take on Medusa. When he reached near the cave of Medusa, he was surprised. The cave was surrounded by people who were already turned into stone. Holding his sword before him, Perseus slowly entered the cave. Perseus remembered Athena's advice, and he started walking backward, looking at the shield's reflection. Soon he spotted Medusa, sleeping in a corner of the cave. Perseus walked backward, looking not upon Medusa, but only upon her reflection in the shield. When he was near enough, he struck off her head with a curved sickle which Hermes had given him. And still, without looking at it, he thrust the head into a bag and hurried away. As soon as he reached back home, he went to the palace to meet the king. Polydectes thought Perseus was lying and asked him to show Medusa's head. Perseus took the head from his bag without even looking at it. He knew that even though the head was dead, it was still capable of turning anyone into stone. The king gasped and gave out a little moan. Then he went quiet as he had turned to a stone. That was how Perseus saved his mother from Polydectes. They lived together happily for a very long time.
Okay, so hopefully you managed to watch that film again, and we're going to just go back and think about those Greek mythological features and see if we can recognize some of them. So Let's see if we can remember. I don't know if you spotted some of these things in the story. We've got the god and goddess, we've got the hero or heroine, and we've got the mythological creature, and we've got, if you can think about what the lesson of that story might be. So perhaps you remembered that the hero in the story was Perseus. And Perseus, we know that Perseus is the hero, not only because the story is called after him, but also because he was the person who had the quest, had the mission in the story. And his mission was to bring the head of the Medusa. So she was the mythological creature. She doesn't really exist, but she had sort of snakes as part of her body. So she was kind of part woman, part snake, mythological creature. This one's a bit more tricky, so you had to try and spot the god and the goddess. And in the story, we had the goddess Athena and we had the god Hermes. And they, if you remember, they stepped in to help Perseus with his mission. And they gave him all of the tools and all the things that he needed, all the weapons that he needed to get Medusa's head, to kill Medusa and get her head. They gave him the shield. They told him what to do, not to look at her, to walk backwards and use the shield. They gave him the special scythe. They gave him some winged sandals and helped him to get the invisibility helmet. So the gods were definitely interfering in that part of the story, and they were interfering on Perseus's side. This was really hard, and you might not agree with this as a lesson, but I thought the lesson in this story is that you should be brave and protect the people you love. And that's because Perseus was the hero of that story, and what he did is he said, no, I'm not letting my mum being imprisoned. I don't want that to happen. And he went to great lengths and put himself in great danger and had to be very brave to protect his mum and to rescue her from that evil king Polydectus. So I want you to think, this is your task for this afternoon. I'd like you to think about some of the other myths that we looked at last week and some of the other characters, and I've sort of found some pictures of the characters that we talked about last week in the myths. And I would like you to say whether you think that they are a hero or heroine, whether they're a god or goddess, or whether they're a mythological creature. So I want you to think carefully about that. If you can't remember some of these characters, because there's a lot of them and they've all got quite similar sounding names, if you can't remember, you could go back to our Byron Wood YouTube channel and you could look back at the videos from Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday last week, and you could re-watch those videos of those stories so that you can remember who the characters are. So if I think, just show you what I want you to do. So if I think that Medusa is a hero, then I'm going to type her name into this box here. If I think that Odysseus is a god, I'm going to type his name in here. Those are actually not correct, so do not copy my answers. I'm just showing you what I want you to do. And then the second task is to really think about some of the lessons in the myths that we learned about last week. So I would like you to think about one or two of the myths, say it by name. In the myth of Perseus and the Medusa, in the myth of Pandora's box, I think the lesson is, and then I want you to have a think. There isn't a right or wrong answer to this, so it's just really your own thoughts about what you think people were supposed to learn from that story. And like I say, it might be that it was the right thing to do something, or that it wasn't the right thing to do something because of what happened in the end to that main character, to that hero or heroine. So some people have got a slightly different task this afternoon. They've got the 4 stories that we've learned about so far in a table, and they've got some possible lessons that you might want to use down here. And what I want you to do is select the right lesson for the right myth. So if you think that look after your mum is the message or the lesson of Theseus and the Minotaur, then you put a Y in that box there. So hopefully that all makes sense. And then before I go, I just wondered if you are enjoying the Greek myths. There are lots of other things that you can do to explore them. For example, you can listen to some of the stories as audiobooks. So these aren't videos, but you can listen to the stories being read to you. So if you want to look at that link there, that will take you through to some recordings of different Greek myths. I've already shared this with some of my class, but you can read some of the Greek myths for free on this website. If you go to this website, it's a completely free library, online library. And then if you just type in the search box Greek myths, then you can look for some stories to read there. And you could even watch a movie about the Greek myths, such as the Disney Hercules movie. I think it's Disney, it might be Pixar. Or Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. I'm not sure if that's a PG or not, so maybe just check with your grown-up first before you start watching that. So don't forget to send in your work through assignments to Microsoft Teams. If you're doing any pictures, you can email them to us at y4chestnut@astreabarronwood.org or y4maple@astreabarronwood.org. Hope you've enjoyed this afternoon's lesson, and we look forward to seeing all of your work. Bye.